Thank you for your interest and decision in applying for the State Appraiser Regulatory Agency Support or SARA's grant. This training will walk you through how to correctly fill out the required forms for this grant application. We will learn how to fill out the face page or the SF424, how to fill out the budget information page or the SF424A non-construction, how to fill out the assurances page or the SF424B, filling out the disclosure of lobbying page or the SFLLL, how to complete your ASC budget narrative form, and then lastly, how to create your statement of work, narrative, or work plan. We have pre-populated the standard application forms. Those forms are located on our website at the link provided on the screen. Once you get to that website, please scroll to the bottom left-hand side and you will see this highlighted section, Initial Application Forms and Instructions. You will click on the standard application forms, save those forms to your desktop. You would also click on the ASC budget narrative, save that to your desktop or wherever you will be working on your application. Now that you have saved the standard forms on your desktop, you can start filling out the form for your grant application. As you can see, for your face page, it is actually 3 pages that make up the face page. The first page, when you start with number 1, is already pre-populated with number 1 and number 2, which is you are submitting an application, and this is a new application. Number 3 will be filled out by the ASC, so you could leave that blank. Number 4 will be left blank. Number 5A, please fill this out if you were a past recipient. You were issued a PMS or Payment Management System PIN number. You will put that there. If you did not have a grant from the ASC, you could leave this blank. You will then jump to number 8. For 8A, you will put the legal name of your organization. It must match your SAMS.gov registration and include your EIN number and your UEI or unique entity identifier where you see it is asked for. If you do not have a UEI that is active, you cannot apply for a grant. You will then add your address to include your state and city and zip code. If you have an organizational department, so you may have your legal name is one entity, but you're operating out of another department or division, you would include that information in 8E. For F, you're putting the name of the individual that has oversight of the grant. So if we had specific questions on stuff that was submitted and we'd like to ask for clarifying questions, you'll put the name of that person there. This is different from the person that can sign or the signatory official for your organization. So usually the person named in F is a program manager, and the person that's signing for the organization is usually the director, VP level. You will also please include your telephone number and the email address because that is the quickest way for us to get in contact. Moving on to page 2 of the face page, we have a lot of information already pre-populated. Number 9 is pre-populated that you are a state government entity. Number 10 is the federal agency for which you are applying for. We've included the catalog of federal assistance number for number 11, as well as the grant opportunity information. On this page, you will just simply jump to number 15 to provide us with a short description of how the grant funds would be utilized. We use this for purposes of sharing with the community what type of support that you're looking for. An example would be to support our state training plan or to improve our IT systems. Moving on to page 3 of the face page, for number 16, you are including your congressional district as the applicant, and that is determined by the address that you placed on page 1. So please put the congressional district for what that address falls under, which congressional district. As for program or project congressional district, this is seeking to know what these grant funds would support, what congressional districts. More than likely, it is statewide, that it's supporting a statewide initiative. So you would just put statewide there or just leave it blank. As for number 17, we are looking for your entire 3-year period of performance. As indicated before, the earliest start date that we can consider is 10/1/2023. That would allow you to recoup costs backdating from that date. If you were to select that start date, then your end date would be 3 years after that. So in that example, it would be 9/30/2026. As far as number 18, estimated funding, you are only going to be required to do the federal share that you're requesting, or 18A. We're looking just for year one request. That's the amount that you would put in 18A. For number 19, this grant is not subject to Executive Order 12372, so please select C. For number 20, please indicate if your state is delinquent for any federal debt, yes or no. And then for number 21, the authorized representative would read that statement, and if they agree, select the agree. Your authorized representative is the signing official or the authorized person to enter into an agreement with the federal government. Usually that's the executive director level or president or senior leader in your organization. We do need a wet or Adobe PDF signature on this form. So please, if that is not filled out, we will return it because we do need a signature. Moving on to the SF424A or budgets. This form as well is 3 pages. We will go over page 1 here. And all you're doing here, because number 1 and A and B are populated already, you are filling out 1E, which is for the new budget, federal amount being requested. You will put that total here. This total will match the number that you had on the face page, line 18A. Moving on to page 2 of the budget, you are only going to concentrate on the first column that we've pre-populated with the acronym SARAS, because that is the grant that you're applying for. You will enter the cost in each cost category that you're seeking funding, federal funding for. If, for instance, you're not requesting funds in that cost category, please enter 0. Please note that these will auto-populate into future pages. So whatever number you put here, it will automatically calculate the total at the end and forward to other pages. Moving on to page 3 of the budget, which is also the last form or last page of the budget. For section C, non-federal share resources, this section will remain blank because there is no cost share. So you will just skip to section D, where you will enter The amounts on how you plan to draw down or spend down year one. So year one's federal share 13 will populate from your prior entries, and then you would just explain how you would spend year one. So for instance, if you said year one you're requesting $100,000, then you're forecasting maybe first quarter you'll spend 25,000, second quarter you'll spend 25,000, third quarter maybe zero, but fourth quarter another 50,000. The forecast cash needs should uh, equal the total year for year one. And lastly, in section E, you are going to forecast year 2 and 3, so future years funding. So remember, this is a 3-year grant. So in section E, column C, second, you will just anticipate. Let's say you think you're going to request 120,000 next year. You would put that amount in second year. And if you felt like you were going to request another 120 in the third year, you would put 120 there. Fourth year will remain blank because this is a 3-year grant. So we're just going to need year one funding, which we've gone through, and now future fundings of year 2 and 3. The indirect section, section F, is optional because it's only applicable if you have a federally negotiated indirect cost rate. That's where you would put your indirect cost charges there due to your rate. Moving to the assurances page, or SF424B, this is, please have your signatory official or your, the person that's authorized to sign on behalf of your organization review these assurances. These are standard terms, assurances from all federal agencies. So we would need a wet or Adobe signature with title and the name of your organization placed here to signify that your organization will comply with the assurances that are detailed in this form. For the next form, the SFLLL, or the disclosure of lobbying, this is the notification if your agency is lobbying. You do need to disclose that. You would fill out the form here to disclose the lobbying activities. If there are no lobbying activities to disclose, you do not have to submit this form. Moving on to the ASC budget narrative. This document goal is to provide justification to the budget 424A form that you've submitted. Remember that form only included costs, so this is the backup or the justification of why you're requesting those costs or how you came up with those totals. It is important to fill this form out in its entirety. Please include the point of contact name that the ASC can reach out to if we have questions about that budget. That name would go underneath the agency name. That name may more than likely be the same name that you've included on the face page as the person to contact with regards to issues or related to questions about the application. As you can see, our narrative includes the same object class categories that were on the 424A. So I provided a screenshot of that. You will see a narrative for personnel, fringe benefits, travel, equipment, supplies, contractual. Construction is there, but this grant does not have construction costs or does not allow for construction costs. So that would be a 0. And the other category for anything that does not fall nicely into those object class. Please note that the object classes that are represented here are only for costs to the state or the recipient. You do not put your contractor costs in personnel, fringe, travel, and equipment. All contract costs or contractor costs go in the contractual uh, object class. So that includes a contractor's travel, their expenses, their supplies, all of that is in contractual costs. All other costs are for the costs of the state. So please keep that in mind. If you are going to claim personnel costs, please be sure to also indicate the percent effort. So for instance, if you are going to pick 5% of maybe your budget officer's uh, salary costs because they dedicate 5% of their time to this grant, you would list that under personnel as budget officer, 5%. You would calculate 5% of their total salary, and that's the cost that you would put in the federal amount requested. Same for their fringe. It would be 5% of their fringe. You would calculate that and put that on the narrative. Same for travel. If you are requesting travel, you will indicate travel for 4 individuals to training XYZ would cost X amount, and so forth. Here's an example of a budget narrative uh, filled out for your use. As you can see, the state is State ABC. The agency name is ABC Real Estate Appraisal Regulatory Agency. When you go down to the name, we have the name and title of the individual that we could contact if we had any issues with their email address and phone number. When you go to personnel, here's an example of where the executive director is charging 10% for their time for the overview and oversight of the program, of the grant program, and is requesting 10% of their salary, which is $5,000. The program manager is dedicating 5% of their time, and maybe they're the ones that do the progress reports or do the semi-annual reports or things of that nature. That takes about 5% of their time, and that's $2,500. As you go down to the fringe benefits, you see the associated executive director's 10% fringe, as well as the program manager's fringe. Uh, for the state share column, that's zero because the state is not matching any of their funds. So it's only federal amount. So that's why we have only populated the federal amount requested side. Moving on to the travel section of the ACS budget narrative. This is the section where you will enter any travel costs for personnel, your employees, not your contractors. So this is solely for employees of the state. So an example here, we have the best training course for 5 board members. This is just the travel cost to this training, the best training course, which will be in November 2024 in Nashville, Tennessee. These costs for travel are the airfare, hotel, and per diem for those 5 board members. The next line item, it's travel costs for the best executive regulatory course for the executive director, spring 2025. Those costs would be airfare, hotel, and per diem. So that cost. Onto the equipment costs. So these are any piece of equipment that would be $5,000, um, over $5,000. That's what would be in the equipment line category. Everything else would be in the supplies category. So in supplies, we have listed computers or laptops. So 3 laptops for board members to conduct board business. So 3 computer units at 2,000 each to equal the $6,000. So notice we keep it in supplies, even though it's over 5,000. It's not 5,000 a unit. It's just cumulative of over 5,000. So that is supplies. So just that caveat to keep in mind. Moving on to contractual line. So this is where you would put all contract expenses to include, if you had a contractor, their travel, any training that they were going to do. Everything here is the contractual line. So an example here, we are contracting 2 investigators to address the backlog of appraisal complaints for the state. We estimate that would be $27,000. And then we also have a line for training and travel costs for those 2 investigators to attend investigator one training and in-person training. So that would be $4,000 estimated. And then lastly, in the other category is for everything else that does not fall neatly into these cost categories. So here I give an example of maybe you want to pay for a Zoom license. So this is a Zoom license used to conduct appraisal board business for $500. And then the registration fees for those trainings would go here because it's not really travel. Registration fees for the best trading course in November for those 5 staff members, which would detailed in the statement of work, um, would be $2,000, and then the registration fee for the best executive regulatory course for that executive director is $500. So that this budget narrative does auto-populate each cost category, so you wouldn't have to do that. The form does it for you. As you move through the lower portion of the ASC budget narrative, you will see that total direct costs, would auto-populate or auto-calculate. And in our example, total direct costs would be $120,000. That is consequently the max amount that you could request of direct costs for year one. But let's say you have indirect costs, an indirect cost rate agreement or a federally negotiated indirect cost rate agreement or NICRA with your cognizant agency. You can request that, but you would have to submit your NICRA with your application, just demonstrating or showing that you do have a federally negotiated rate. In our example, let's say our NICRA says that we are allowed 10% of total direct costs. So in this example, if your total direct cost for year one is 120,000, 10% of that is 12,000 that you can claim for indirect costs for year one. And so your total will then be for year one, 132,000, which is the 120 plus the 12,000 to give you 132,000 for year one. Now we will take a look at your statement of work and provide some development tips. First and foremost, there is not a set form that you will use for this portion of the application. So Microsoft Word works great for this. Your statement of work can also be known as your grant narrative or the grant work plan. And the purpose of this statement of work or SOW is just for you to have the opportunity to explain how your organization will carry out the grant. Some important elements of a good statement of work should include the project title, uh, the NOFA priority that supports that project. So I've also included the priorities that were in the NOFA this year. So this project would either reduce barriers to entry into the real estate appraiser profession, improve the state real estate appraiser and AMC complaint and or enforcement process. Either does it improve the data submission to the National Registry? Is it staff development? Or is it just improving the state's overall process or infrastructure to ensure compliance with Title 11 requirements? So your statement of work should just, when you list that project, just identify the priority that that project supports. And lastly, the part of the project that that you would be doing is describe how you plan to execute that project over the next 3 years. Be sure to include milestones and details of what items of the budget support that project. Let's say one of your projects, you're interested in doing a practicum or a Perea project. I'd like to go over some of the development tips that you need to keep in mind if you are submitting either a practicum or a Perea project. So please focus on pages 2 and 3 of the NOFA, where these conditions need to be met in order for you to apply for a practicum or Perea project. Number one, does your state have a shortage of appraisers in rural, tribal lands, or other underserved markets uh, that need now to increase the number of appraisers serving that community, those communities? Then you meet that condition. The next thing is your state must ensure that your proposed program complies with the requirements established by the AQB of the foundation. So those two conditions need to be in play in order for us to consider a practicum or Perea project from the state. If you determine your state met those two criteria, then it's time to write up your statement of work for your practicum or Perea project. Also refer to pages 11 of 12 of the NOFO for additional details. But in essence, if you're doing a practicum or Perea project, these are the elements that need to be included in your statement of work. The statement of need. So that need is including the documented data that clearly demonstrates there's a shortage of real estate appraisers in your rural, tribal land, or other underserved market. You would also have to include your objectives and your measurable accomplishments. What is your objective in executing this grant? Uh, Please be detailed in that section. Your methodology plan includes the details of how your program will make sure that what your objectives and measurable outcomes are met. And then lastly, your evaluation plan identifies the process of how your state will ensure that you will monitor and track progress of your set objectives and measurable accomplishments. An example could be for your objective that you would hope to increase the number of appraisers by 50% by the end of the 3-year period of performance. You outline in your methodology plan the details in order to get to that point. Maybe year one, you have targeted rural areas. Year two, you're targeting tribal lands. Year three, you're targeting other underserved markets and how you hope to accomplish that. And your evaluation plan is just showing how you will review and update and adjust as needed to make sure that your objectives are met. With this slide, I attempt to provide an example of a good statement of work. It is by no means the required template, but just gives you a sense of what needs to be included. Use it how you see fit. So I have a named project title, Reducing Barriers to the Real Estate Appraiser Profession with the statewide practicum program. I list the priority that that project supports. I took that right from the NOFA. I go in to explain that statewide has a shortage of real estate appraisers in rural parts of the state, and that we are submitting a project that would allow statewide to partner with statewide junior college to create a practicum program that will assist aspiring appraisers into the profession. I go on to say that the state only has 2 certified and 1 licensed appraiser in the 6 rural counties that these folks are to serve, and that I've provided the verifiable data in the appendix to substantiate that claim. I explained that in year one, we will work with statewide junior college to develop the practicum program and to seek AQB approval. In year two, we plan to market and recruit those potential students into our program. So hopefully by the end of year two, we have those students. In year three, we hope to graduate 20 students from our program to increase the pool of licensed appraisers to serve this rural community by 20. I also explained that we are seeking the grant funds to cover all the costs of executing this grant program, to include stipends to each of the students. I also state, in order to encourage participants to complete the program, stipends will be paid in parts: 33% at the beginning of the program, 33% at the midpoint of the program, and 34% upon the completion of the final evaluation. I also state the details of cost and justification have been included in the budget and the budget narrative. So again, this is just a broad overview of what we'd be looking for in a statement of work, that it identifies the project title, it ties to the priority, it explains a little bit of how the program will be executed from years one to year three, understanding that things change, but at least we have an idea of what the plan is, because that's all the statement of work is a plan of how you will execute. And so that when you get awarded and you start to report on progress, we kind of use the statement of work against your progress report to see how you're doing in executing the grant. And if adjustments need to be made, they are made. If you have questions as you prepare your application, or still have some confusion of what needs to be included in your statement of work, please reach out to the Grants Management Office. You can send us an email at grants@asc.gov. That is our preferred method of communication. Or you could give us a call at 202 792 1168. We thank you for taking the time to listening to our webinar, and please reach out if you have any questions.